This is a very important meeting today. I think this is our fourth one, where we are continuing to discuss an agenda that is pivotal to who we are as a people. Let me start by just summarizing. I know we are getting more and more new people signing on, people who are not aware of ADDI, people who are not aware of the Pan-African Congress, people who are not aware of the agendas that we have been discussing. So I'll just kind of hash through that very quickly to make sure we're all on the same page as we deliberate. Pan-African Congress is a conversation that was started by African diaspora, descendants of the formerly enslaved, headed by the likes of W.E.B. Du Bois, who were just tired of being, were sick and tired of being sick and tired. And all they wanted to do was go home. All they wanted to do was to bring the spirits of their ancestors back home to Africa. So starting in the 1900s, conversations took place in London, in Manchester, in Paris, in New York, all of them brought together by African diaspora, just like you and I, who felt that something was wrong, that there was a wrong that needed to be righted. And so it is, 2 meetings were held in London, one in Manchester, one in France, and one in New York. By 1974, President Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, having realized that conversations to do with the children of Africa coming home, they must start and end in Africa. He sponsored what would be Pan-African Congress number 6, which was held in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. All the conversations had to do with how do we bring the children of Africa back home. It was a lot of years, centuries have passed, and Africa had not done anything. After 1974, 20 years went by, no other meetings were held. And then again, 1994, President Museveni of Uganda also felt very strongly that we needed to pick up that conversation. So together with more African diaspora, PAC 7 was held in Kampala, Uganda. Discussions continued. It was very broad subject matters at that time. They talked about democracy, human rights, rule of law in Africa. But some of the issues that were never really tackled, they have to do with dual citizenship. They had to do with the 6th region. Of course, the 6th region was only added to the AU Constitution in 2002. And then, of course, the issue of true economic empowerment, because as you all know, African countries were given, including Caribbean countries, they were given political independence, limited political independence. What was denied from all of us was economic liberation. So the issues of economic liberation must be front and center of any conversation that we are going to have as African diaspora, because it is through denial of economic liberation that we have been relegated to the 10th class citizen, no matter where you find us on the world stage as people. So it is that the last approved PAC was in 1994. There have been efforts to regroup and also put together PAC 8, but there were some issues. Be it as it may, what we're going to be doing is PAC 8, after consulting with some heads of states and being advised that instead of PAC 9, what we should have is PAC 8, Part 1. Why Part 1? President Museveni would like to sponsor PAC 8, Part 2 in his country in 2024 to commemorate 30 years since he last sponsored PAC 7 in his country of Uganda. So that is the history of where we are. We are simply saying, as African diaspora, and it was made very clear, that for our meeting to be meaningful, we must have a truly representative gathering of people of African descent from all over the world. And I'm going to repeat that. For our meeting to be meaningful, for our meeting to be accepted, it must be a true representation of people of African descent from all over the world. So if there are Black people in India, they must be represented. If there are Black people in the Amazons, they must be represented. Black people in Africa, because the conversation is about bringing us together. So we are embarking on a massive, aggressive outreach to reach out to all of you, to let you know what it is that we want to discuss. Ours is going to be a limited PAC. with a focus on issues pertaining to reclaiming our economic liberation. First week, we talked about dual citizenship and the various options on how we can become citizens of Africa. Why is this important? As I was deliberating with one of the African heads of states, I had set up the meeting specifically to challenge him to say, heads of states, when you were talking about Africa's sixth region, and you defined it as all people of African descent living outside Africa, I said, with all due respect, Mr. President, you were making some assumptions that are not right. I said, you made an assumption that we were equal. And I asked him, if you were to pretend, Mr. President, that you're standing at the edge of the Americas along the East Coast, and you would yell at the top of your voice, African diaspora, or people, all people of African descent, come on, let's go home to Africa. And assuming we could walk across the Atlantic, guess what's going to happen when we get to the west coast of Africa? They're going to start asking us, where were you born? This one says, I was born in Nigeria. Welcome home, my brother, come on in. And the next one, where were you born? I was born in Liberia. Welcome home, my brother, come on in. And then they go to this woman, where were you born? He says, I was born in Atlanta, Georgia. And they ask, where is your visa? And I said, you see, Mr. President, we are not equal. Until the children of Africa, descendants of the formerly enslaved, until the children of Africa who was born in Africa, who no longer have connections with Africa, until they too can have an African citizenship, it is then and only then can that definition be correct. So as is, the definition of Africa's sixth region is incorrect, and it makes assumptions that we are all equal. No, we are not equal. We must equalize the playing field. Descendants of the formerly enslaved, they too must have citizenship in an African country. So we discussed the pathways, various pathways that needed to be enabled for diaspora to be able to say, if I wake up one day and I throw a dart on the map of Africa, whatever country that dart ends up in, if I choose to be a citizen of that country, as a person of African descent, particularly descendants of the formerly enslaved, there should be a pathway for you to go back home. This is a wrong that needs to be righted. This is a wrong that has taken over 400 years to right. You and I, my brothers and sisters, we have a responsibility to fix this. It was made very clear to me by the heads of states I spoke to that it is going to take us, African diaspora, coming together, creating that unity of purpose, and coming together with true representation of the people of Africa in the diaspora, and table our desires and our wishes to the African heads of states. And I can assure you, they will listen to us. All we have to do is come together, have a true representation from South America, North and South America, Caribbean, Europe, Asia, wherever Black people are, know that we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, that our ancestors were forcibly taken out of Africa, spirits to rest. That's what makes this conversation important. So yes, the first weekend we talked about pathways. We now have a committee that's working on those different issues that were raised. So when we go to Zimbabwe to deliberate on the issues, we are going to be working like a well-oiled machine. Second week, we talked about the establishment of the sixth region. We said, if heads of states, we thank you for incorporating the sixth region into the African Union Constitution. My other attack on the head of state was, Mr. President, what were you all thinking? You said we are the sixth region. How come we're not equal to the other 5 regions on the African continent? Just so all of you know, the governance structure for the African Union, everything to do with the African Union starts with the Permanent Representative Council. The Permanent Representative Council, if I wanted a table and chairs during my tenure as the ambassador, I had to send my request with justification to the Permanent Representative Council. From the smallest issues to the biggest issues enter the African Union through the Permanent Representative Council. From the Permanent Representative Council, they approve what they can approve within their pay grade, but those that they cannot approve, they pass to the Executive Council. Now, the Permanent Representative Council is made up with an ambassador from every African country. So there are 55 of them. They live in Addis Ababa, and they do the day-to-day work of running the African Union. The members of the Executive Council, which is kind of like the Senate, if you were to use the US structure, roughly, is made up of each foreign minister from every country. So that's 55 of them. They usually meet about 4 days before the Heads of State Summit twice a year. Those issues come from the Permanent Representative Council. They go to the Executive Council. They deliberate on what they can approve. What's within their pay grade, they approve. What they cannot approve, they pass it on to the Heads of States, who are the African Union. So that is the structure. So the issue I was asking the Heads of States, I said every country in Africa, as a member of the 5 regions in Africa, they all are sending ambassadors to the African Union. Nowhere is there any advocacy for the African diaspora. Those ambassadors, they advocate for their countries initially. They also advocate for their regions. And then they collectively all come together, depending on the issues, they advocate for the continent of Africa. At no point are we represented. They have organs of the African Union. Again, members of the 5 regions are they are representatives in those organs. No need to need representation at the PRC level. We need representation at the organs of the AU. So we can also be advocating not only for the diaspora issues, but also join our brothers and sisters on the continent in advocating for issues pertaining to our beloved continent. We discussed the locations of the African 6th region. We discussed and felt that we are roughly about the same population as ECOWAS, which is Economic Commission of West Africa's African states. They send about 15 ambassadors to the African Union. We will be asking also for permission to be granted for us to send 10 to 15 ambassadors from the diaspora to go and live in Addis Ababa and advocate for our diaspora issues. For we intend to actively be involved in the discussions pertaining to the building of our Africa. We refuse to continue to be sidelined. That is our Africa. It is our inheritance. It is the inheritance of our children, grandchildren, and generations to come, and no one is going to continue to push us aside. So the establishment of the 6th region, the discussions went on to talk about where the region should be. It was a very aggressive conversation. Several countries were shortlisted. We now have a team that's now looking through all the recommendations to make sure that every voice that gave an opinion is counted. Last week, we talked about how we were denied economic liberation, and that until we get economic liberation, political liberation alone, without economic liberation, we are still enslaved. So now, while Martin Luther King used to say, how do you expect a bootless man to pull themselves up by the bootstraps when they have no boots? Well, we can now tell Brother Martin that we now have the boots. What's left is for us to have the will to pull ourselves by our bootstraps. And that's where we come in today. We have the intelligence, we have the intellectual capacity, and we have the financial muscle. If you were to imagine, like I always say, 1 million of us with $100 a month for a year, you do the math. Now make it 1 million of us with $100 a month for 2 years, for 3 years, for 5 years. Now make it 2 million of us, make it 5 million of us. You see how easily and seamlessly we can raise money on our own and create a massive African, Pan-African Diaspora Global Fund. Massive Pan-African Global Fund. We don't need anybody. I can assure you, my brothers and sisters, when the heads of states know that African diaspora are sitting on a Pan-African global fund with $1 billion, with $5 billion, the conversation is over. You see, where we are being defeated is that we are not getting the big contracts that the Chinese, the Europeans, the Middle Easterners, the Indians are taking out of Africa. It's because they come in with money to fund the developments. We are not able to commit on equal footing simply because we do not have the funding. When we have our own funding, it'll be easy for us to go to the African heads of states and demand that the building of the Africa we want is our responsibility and ours alone. China does not go outside China for China's development. Europe does not look outside Europe for European development. India, Middle East, they all look from within. It is only Africa that looks outside for Africa's development. And I have to say, we can't blame the African heads of states because we are also missing in action. There's no place that you can go to today to address the African diaspora. So we have a responsibility to unite, to have a great registry, a directory of all us, all of us, our expertise and what we do in our various aspects. So when we truly go to the African heads of states and say, we demand first right of refusal of all contracts that are deemed international, we will have the financial backing. The expertise is not a problem. The only thing we need, as far as the expertise is concerned, is unity. Unity. When we can say, yes, Mr. President, look at the engineers. All we are going to be asking is 3 to 6 months to make sure these international contracts are filled by the African diaspora. If we cannot fill them as African diaspora, then and only then should they take the contracts outside Africa. It is just the right thing to do. All those monies, all those huge returns that are being made in these investments are ending up being inheritance of those children of people who don't look like you and I. When we don't organize ourselves to make sure that we have access to these contracts, we are denying our children their inheritance. Do you know how many kilometers of roads, thousands, millions of kilometers of roads that are going to be built in Africa? Serious money to be made. And that money is going to be siphoned out of Africa because you and I refuse to unite. The mining that's taking place in Africa will blow your mind away. And they're all siphoning the money out of Africa to their children, grandchildren, and generations to come. Somebody told me that China, some of the people who are coming to Africa are being released from prison and they're given a little bit of money. Excuse me. A little bit of money to get started in Africa. I am telling you this, my brothers and sisters, and I've seen it. Because they bring in equipment, mining equipment, brand new from China. In 6 months, they abandon the mining equipment. You know why they abandon it? Because they would have made so much money that what it cost them to get the equipment is insignificant. That's how quickly prisoners out of China are becoming multimillionaires in your Africa. The only difference is they have the capital to get started. You don't. They have the capital to get started. You don't. That's it. Now you know. What are you going to do about it? So when we go to Zimbabwe and we ask the government of Zimbabwe to back the creation of a global, massive Pan-African fund, be a shareholder. Because a young woman growing up in Louisiana, you may never set foot in Africa. But when you become a shareholder in this fund that's now going to fund these massive projects, development projects in Africa, that's how you benefit from your Africa. Because the returns are huge. In addition, this massive global fund is also going to be available to uplift communities of color around the world. So yes, if you are a community that says, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, we can keep having these Chinese running our grocery stores, we can't keep buying from the Middle Eastern shops, we must own our own. You can apply for a loan to have your own grocery store in your neighborhood, to have your own mechanic shop in your neighborhood, to have your own nail parlor in your neighborhood. All of it designed to make sure that Black money stays within the community, at least 6 days, give it a week or something. But as it is, Black money can hardly last 6 hours in the community. Our people get paid. The rest of the money goes to Walmart, they go to KFC, they go to buy clothes, because we don't own anything. It's a paradigm shift. And it takes you and I understanding it. It takes you and I sitting at the dinner table and telling the children the dynamics, that what has kept us from getting where we need to be is access to capital. But we, this generation, we are going to change that paradigm. We are going to come together and we're going to do just like the Jews do. The Jews never looked out to anybody. They looked from within. The gigantic Jewish fund was started simply, they said, we got to take care of ourselves. And it is the Jews never go to anybody. They look from within. We are much, much larger population than the Jews. We can do it better than the Jews. What is needed is a mind that is awoken. And that is why we are here today. To understand that the way we were defeated, first and foremost, was the mind. When the Westerners came to Africa, they found some amazing human beings, powerful, intelligent, resilient, indestructible. So they said, how can we conquer these people if we do not destroy their minds? Make them believe everything that represents them is bad and undesirable. And we fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Centuries ago, to this day, we're still suffering from that disease. The disease that makes us believe we are not good, that I cannot trust my brother, I cannot trust my sister, that better things are out there from people who don't look like me, my brothers and sisters. For how long? For how long? That's why we're here today. You see, an awoken African, it doesn't matter where you put us, and by African, I mean all people of African descent. An awoken person, no matter where you put them, they will always think for what is ultimately best for us. So the question is, are you awoken? Are you prepared to accept the fact that we are sick and we need healing? Are you prepared to also realize that it's going to take you having a serious conversation with the image in the mirror to ask yourself simple questions? Who are you? Why do you feel the way you do? And are you comfortable with the way things are for you? And are you willing to live this world the way it is for your children, grandchildren, and generations to come? Look at your children. Right? Are they not worth doing anything, everything that you can to live this world just a little bit better for them? Like I always end by saying, 20 years from now, when your grandchildren, your children will come to you and say, grandmother, grandfather, mom, dad, there were issues with us as a people, what did you? I would hope that your answer is a very simple one. That yes, we came together. Yes, we pulled our financial resources together. This is what we did. While mission is not yet accomplished, this is why you to complete the struggle until victory is ours. We owe that at the minimum to our children. And let's all guarantee that as we exit this world, we will leave them with some of the strongest shoulders for them to stand on. And we will leave them with a clear path on how this war can be won. A clear path that we can say the Africa that was can be reclaimed and be rebuilt again. The Africa that taught the world what it means to be human, the Africa that the world went to civilization that Africa, we can recreate it. After all, we are the mothers and fathers of humanity. The educational systems, the miseducation of the African is an issue that we must address. It's an issue that we must understand. It is a reality. There is such a thing as miseducation of Black people around the world. Today, we are here to deliberate on issue number 5 during the Pan-African Congress, which is the establishment of a Pan-African television and a Pan-African radio, where we hope the hunted for a change will tell our story. The miseducation of the African must be righted. No one else is going to do for us except us. May the rewriting of our story by the hunted begin. Welcome to Pan-Africa Part 8, Pan-African Congress number 8, Part 1. May the conversations begin. Back to you, Sister Rai.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And thank you for those great words. At this present time, I'd like to call on our dear Mr. Sipwe Baleka, our ADDI 8th PAC 1 coordinator. Brother Sipwe, you have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you to Her Excellency Ambassador Kwao and Vice President Damian Cook. My name is Sipwe Baleka, and I am serving as the Congress Agenda Coordinator. I would like to especially welcome, I saw that several of the newly formed Council of Pan-African Diaspora Elders have joined the meeting tonight. So I would especially like to welcome you. And if you could please identify yourselves and drop your contact, identify yourselves as part of that Council of Elders in the chat. Her Excellency, the Ambassador, has been talking about the historic nature of the upcoming Congress. The President of Zimbabwe will be only the 3rd president to host such a Congress on the African continent. That being said, I would also like to point out that this is the first Pan-African Congress that is being led by a woman. That in itself is historic. Her Excellency, the Ambassador, told me that her tenure at the AU was like going to school, where she learned the inner workings of power on the African continent, and that she graduated with honors. And during that time, she gained crystal clarity on actually the steps, what needed to be done. One, to bring the African diaspora into the continent, into the African Union, as equal partners with the other 5 regions, what needed to be done, and what were the essential ingredients and steps necessary for achieving real African economic liberation. Not talking about it, but achieving it. And this is the basis of the very limited agenda for the upcoming 8th Pan-African Congress Part 1. Unlike the previous Pan-African Congress, which had very broad platforms, a tactical decision was made by the ambassador based on this inside knowledge and experience that she gained. A decision was made to limit the agenda so that we could establish the AU 6th region with the essential ingredients: the ambassadors at the Permanent Representative Council, a headquarter, a pathway to citizenship, okay, the Diaspora Pan-African Capital Fund and Bank, okay, and what we're going to talk about tonight, which is the Pan-African TV and radio. Now, in order to start this conversation, I want to get into the why and a little bit of an esoteric part of this. I'll be brief. Those of you who know something about my background, right? I made a name for myself as a fitness guru in America, helping truck drivers lose weight, taking the most unhealthy occupation in America and making them a model for corporate wellness. In order to do that, I had to help people change behavior. And in order to do that, I had to become a master of behavior change science. And what I learned in the process of developing the #1 weight loss program in America is that behavior is governed by mental processes, the information, the various mental processes that we have in our head. For example, you don't tie your shoe first and then say, oh, I need to tie my shoe, right? The behavior doesn't come first. It's the thought, it's the mental processes that come first that govern the behavior. So if you want to change behavior, you got to change the mental processes. Now, if mental processes are what governs behavior, what is it that governs the mental processes? The answer to that is values. Your values determine what information you allow into your system, and you give it a high priority, and so therefore you take action on it. Your values determine what information you allow into your system, but you deprioritize it. You kind of just put it on the shelf and you really don't take action on it. And then your values determine what information you don't even allow into your system. Okay, so if behavior is governed by mental processes and mental processes are governed by values, what is it that governs values? The answer to that is culture. We aren't born with values. It's our culture that seeds and nurtures and grows our values. That starts first with our parents, second with our village, our community, third with our schools and society. And a big part of that is our media. If we want to change the trajectory of the future of Africa, if we want to create the Africa that we want, what we need to do is have a culture of the Pan-African values that Her Excellency has been our champion of. We have to have a culture, right, that communicates the values, the Pan-African values of African economic liberation. And once we have clearly identified those values, right, in order to have the information, right, that is sown and nurtured in all of our minds, we need media. We need a Pan-African television that not only rivals, but surpasses CNN, surpasses BBC, surpasses Al Jazeera. This is what we're talking about, so that the values of our Pan-African culture are communicated 24/7 to the global African family as an essential ingredient in creating the Africa that we want. Now, one of the reasons we have the Diaspora Pan-African Capital Fund is so that we can control and finance that media without any interference from foreigners. The agenda for the Pan-African Congress has been carefully crafted so that we come out of the Congress having achieved consensus from the broadest range of the African diaspora and the African family, those at home and those abroad, right? And so that is the discussion tonight. Her Excellency Ambassador Quao gave you a review of the first 3 prep meetings that we've had for the Congress. Tonight is the 4th prep meeting. And again, after tonight's discussion, we'll be setting up a working committee for anyone that's really interested in developing the language, some of the details that we will place on our 0 draft document that we will distribute at the beginning of the Congress. So tonight's discussion, we're going to talk about the Pan-African TV and radio. I know that some that have joined the meeting tonight actually are engaged in Pan-African media, TV, radio, and social media. We especially want to hear from those of you who have experience in this. I'm looking forward to yet another focused, insightful, and intelligent discussion on the agenda tonight. Thank you again, Ray. We're going to open up the floor in a minute. I do want to say briefly that while I was in Zimbabwe, I had the opportunity to accompany Her Excellency Ambassador Quao to a meeting with the Zimbabwe government that were as part of the information and media department within Zimbabwe and their participation in the event. And we had a discussion about what it actually takes to set up a Pan-African TV, even at its highest level, something that could compete on a global scale with international distribution, much like CNN or BBC or something like that. It's incredibly challenging, and the amount of money and finances. During that discussion, we also talked about why it is that we have a lot of our media people are using social media because of its ability for international distribution and its ability to, connect with users, especially young users, many of which may not even have a TV, but they have a phone. So there's a distinction between Pan-African TV and radio and social media. And while social media is important and the entry into it has a very low bar, the entry into television is much higher. And it's tempting for us to go for the low-hanging fruit in terms of distribution, where you can have, say, a YouTube channel or something like that, and you can, have maybe 80,000 followers or 200,000 followers. All of that is important, and that is great. And several people in the chat have asked about Dr. Susan Tata and Wodamaya, who we've been in contact with. I've been in sustained contact with Susan Tata for 2 weeks, and also Her Excellency and I called Wodamaya. We have messaged. So we are engaging those social media influencers. But what we're really talking about is not just social media. We're talking about an actual Pan-African TV with programming, international programming. And that may even mean, having satellites that we own and operate and control. So I just want to put that out there to frame the discussion so that we don't narrow it just to what we are currently doing with social media, which again is important, but what it's going to take to compete with the major news sources in the world today. So I'd like to give the floor to our brother, Michael Thompson.
All right. Hey, thank you so much. What I want to say was that the idea that you have is a great idea. We have to embrace the social media because that's a low-hanging fruit, like you said. But we have those other components like satellites. And then we also have the over-the-air. So when you encompass all of that, it gives us everything we need. And the biggest thing we need, besides for ownership of this infrastructure, is also redundancy. So those three methods give the redundancy that we need because we are at war, which we already know. And the first thing in war, what you do is you take out the communications. So that's why I agree with you when you say that we need all three: internet, satellite, and you didn't say the words over the air, but that's what we need as well. And another part of this is the fact that the internet, just on the continent of Africa by 2025, it's predicted that there'll be $180 billion pumped into the GDP just from the internet piece alone. But what they're doing is Europeans and the Chinese, they're actually underestimating that number to keep us off balance. That number is going to actually be closer to $500 billion as opposed to 180 billion. So they don't want us in this space. So right now is a time for us to get in here and to embrace it. And the reason why I know these things as well is because my background is this. I have a social media platform now that's in more than 200 cities. I've built networks for ABC, NBC, Warner Brothers, Disney, all the rest of them. Also done radio stations and also done satellite communications for DirecTV, as well as NBC and their satellites and backups and all that kind of stuff. So the timing is right for us to all pull together, and we need to give Sifiwe the support that he needs in this vision to make it all happen. So I just wanted to say that, man, I'm behind you and support you 100%, and you're right on point.
Brother Michael, you were quite humble and quick. Please give us 2 minutes. In our discussions that we had, the two of us with Vice President Damien, you explained your platform, Our Black Truth, and you also explained something about the capacity that you've already built in terms of the number of servers and as a social media platform. And can you give us a 2-minute overview, right, where you can let them know what it is that you've built and is coming through the pipeline?
Okay, yeah, basically, because a lot of people have come to me with regards to saying, Michael, we need our own platform, we as Black people. And I had the background to pull it off, having been former vice president at Verizon. I built the system that they call FiOS that a lot of people are familiar with. I built that and sold it to them. And today, right now, my company OBT Social, which stands for Our Black Truth, has 8 platforms. We have our own Facebook, our own YouTube, our own Instagram, our own WhatsApp, our own Spotify. We have a platform called The Back Room. The Back Room is a place where we can go collectively, people that think like we do, and it's invitation only. It's a closed environment where we can archive documents, we can connect with one another, we can live stream, we can video conference, we can do audio calls, we can do any and everything that any other social media platform can do, but it's controlled, keeping the trolls out and people that we don't want, to know about what we're talking about. So that's the Back Room is different in that aspect. And I'm actually going to put it in a chat so people can come and check it out and all that and show your support for it. And we also have infrastructure right now in more than 200 cities. So when you come and look at our infrastructure, you have to walk past Facebook, Netflix, Cisco, Verizon, and all of them. They're in the same building where we are. So we are using the same size servers that they're using, connecting to the same fiber optics that they're connected to and all of that. So I'm saying that to say that we did not cut any corners, because this is a serious matter for us as a people. And we're trying to connect the continent of Africa with the diaspora. And you'll see that with OBT Social and the Back Room, that's what our goal is to connect us and give us that way of communicating. And the platform also translates 51 languages right now. And we're trying to get 10 African languages on the platform up and functional by June, Swahili being the first. So that's just a quick intro to myself and OBT Social.
If I remember correctly, you had mentioned that the servers have the capacity for 7 million real-time users. Is that correct?
Well, actually, let me see. I'll tell you exactly how it works. Right now, each server itself can maintain about 150,000 people, and we have about 1,100 servers around the globe right now. So that's the number, but that can be turned up within, say, 15, 20 minutes notice. We can add additional capacity.
Okay, and then based on your what is it, 3 decades experience. As you said, you were vice president at Verizon. I think you had mentioned to me how you helped start AOL. You mentioned, what you've done in some other spheres. In your opinion, when it comes to security, what would you say is the thing that is where we should be thinking and sort of the biggest challenge?
Okay, well, when it comes to security, just like myself, I've put into place what you call a red team and blue team. And one team is offense, the other is defense when it comes to cyber. We have to be very cautious when it comes to security because everything is like cyberspace, the internet. If we don't get our own piece of the internet, it's just like missing out on the land rush that took place in the United States years ago. We missed out on it because our ancestors were enslaved. But right now, the internet is it. So we need to grab that piece and we need to secure it. And we need to secure it by having security protocols and standards in place, which means, again, the cybersecurity side, and also watch who we allow into these platforms as well. And we need to create what I call a walled garden, whereas the Western businesses can't get into our infrastructure unless they buy into a piece so that we still own it, but we get money from them. So that will be a long, kind of discussion, but that's where we need to go. And that's part of the security plan, is to create a walled garden and have our own piece that we own and control.
Thank you so much, Michael. So that's on the social media side. Is there anything that you'd like to say in terms of a proposed Pan-African television network?
Right. When it comes to the proposed Pan-African television, we're talking about over the air and cable television. See, that has a lot of value because there's still a lot of people that have, radio and television. They haven't gone away. It's just that internet is the third component of it. So that gives us the redundancy that we're looking for. And also, there's things that, that people are saying that's going to happen eventually that's going to impact technology. When that happens, you have to have the old traditional methodology of communications because that's what it's going to fall back on. So we need to have that as a fallback in order to secure our people going forward, because we have just strictly internet, that's eventually going to go down one day. And I know this for a fact. But if you have traditional communications like what we grew up on with the rabbit ear antennas and radio, that's another segment that we need to make sure we hold on to.
Okay, and one more question before I call on Alima Dios de Santos. Making the news this week was the news about Byron Allen and Tyler Perry joining forces to buy Paramount or shares of Paramount to add to their brick and mortar conglomerate. Do you have any thoughts, comments? You're in this kind of industry space. Maybe you know some things we don't know. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, well, actually, I disagree with it because no matter what, they're not going to have any power and control in Paramount. So all they're doing is giving the Europeans their money when they should have been putting that money into our community to build our own content because we set the trends. That's what they were missing. We set the trends. And if we have that kind of money behind our people, which we never have, then we would set it off. Because if you look at the movie Black Panther and all these other Black movies that we've had that was about us, they did billions of dollars because people want to see it. Because again, we set the trends on social media and movie, music, everything, but they gave their money to the wrong side. And that's just my opinion when it could have been invested in us.
Wow, okay, you're the first person that I've heard that kind of analysis. So thank you, appreciate that. Please stay with us as we have this conversation. Thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome.
All right. I would like to invite Her Excellency, the Ambassador, to come on for a minute and explain to us the thinking, the motivation for putting the Pan-African TV and radio on the agenda.
Thank you, Brother Sipiwe. Thank you again, everyone, for your contributions. And let me thank you, all of you who contributed to the fundraiser. We truly appreciate you. We could not continue to do the work that we do without your support. Much appreciated, Sister Phyllis. Thank you for your work and thank you for your leadership in this campaign that is so very important to our development and growth. In terms of the Pan-African television, I wanted all of you to be very clear about one thing. If we don't take the initiative to retell our story, we are going nowhere. If we don't make an extra effort to increase the critical mass of those of us who are awoken, everything that we do is going to fall into deaf ears. It is imperative that we begin with our children so they know our history. The reason our children are running away from Africa is because they don't understand our history. They don't understand where we come from. It is the mind that they destroyed us. It is therefore the mind that the battle must begin. We are looking for educators who can begin to write programs, who can begin to write books. We are hoping out of all of you, we come up with teams that are going to work on social media. Theirs is to simply work on a platform and a program for social media. And then we look at how can we have something similar to what we can also call African News Network. They are using these major platforms to spread propaganda. We need to also have a major platform to counter the narrative and speak our truth while at the same time informing and educating our people. Radio station is also the same, to be able to beam around the continent, around the world, wherever you are as a person of color. If you want to hear the truth, tune into the International Pan-African TV, tune into International Pan-African Radio. We have to do it. It is the misinformation that led to our mindset. It is the miseducation that led us to where we are. Let's be honest, I'm sure all of you, you know someone in the family that absolutely disgusts you because of their views, their lack of understanding of who we are as a people, why they don't understand why we should be united. I remember I was talking to a friend of mine. She said they are African-American. They went to a family gathering and she and her husband showed up at the gathering putting on their dashikis. One of the family members came to them, was very upset because she felt that by them showing up in dashikis, they were cheapening her event. They were degrading her event. And so she was very disappointed with the family member because she clearly did not understand what it means to be proud of who she is as an African. Of course, being African-American, she didn't consider herself African. So we have a lot of work to do because it is through that misunderstanding that people are not able to stand up and fight for what belongs to us. We're not able to stand up and create that meaningful unity of purpose. We have too many of us who are still fast asleep. Too many of us who don't believe in what we can do when we work together. The television, the radio station, and a well-orchestrated social media campaign is going to begin to put us on the path to wake up as many of our family members, as many of our friends, as many of our colleagues as possible. It's imperative that we increase the critical mass of those of us who are awoken. The TV and radio, Pan-African, is an absolute must. So we're looking to those of you in the media to really come up and become the force, come up with an agenda that we can then discuss in a very shortlisted way during the Pan-African television. And it's gonna be one of our asks to the government of Zimbabwe to house, to home of the Pan-African TV and the Pan-African radio. During my meeting with the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Information, we did talk about what the process of acquiring a license, but again, that license, if we were to limit it to Zimbabwe, it's kind of limited. So we need to have people who will advise us to say, if we're going to get a license that can beam globally, what does it take? I don't know how to start a television or radio, but we're gonna need a team that's gonna work towards, if we are going to have an ask for Zimbabwe to house it, what will it take? Is Zimbabwe the right place? Or do we need to be somewhere else where we can have better access in order to get the world outreach that we need? I don't know, but we're gonna need a team that will advise us to say, how will an A NN, African News Network, or Pan-African News Network. How should it be set up, and where should we house it? Should we ask the government of Zimbabwe, or should we ask another country? Those are discussions that we hope our media team advisory panel that's going to work on the TV, and another one on the radio, and another panel on the social media. We hope all of you who are interested in being part of that conversation can reach out to Brother Sipiwe and volunteer which advisory panel you'd like to be part of. And we hope you are somebody who can also be in a position to come to Zimbabwe. But even if you can't, your contributions are needed. They're very important, and they're indeed valued. That's why we are here today, to say we want to hear from you. Where do you think we should have the Pan-African radio station, Pan-African radio? How do you think we should move forward? And then those who are writing books, you are also part of that conversation, because you will be helping in terms of the history. You're now going to be responsible for programming to help us and say, if we are going to make sure that we put our children on a clean path of our history, we need the historians who can then begin to help us, those who have written books, and help us tell our story in an organized way. The journalists, yes, they can do their research, but if they have historians who can help them in their programming, it'll make their jobs a little bit easier. Back to you, Brother Sipiwe.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Again, we are at war. We are acknowledging this even in our apparel for the 8th PAC, which is why we have the berets. We are at war. Part of war is propaganda, okay? Now, in the propaganda war, you have your fighter jets. That's television, global satellite television. Those are the fighter jets. We also have our anti-aircraft artillery. That's social media. Right now, whoever has the TV has air superiority. And it's not a pun intended, because we're talking about airwaves. If we don't have a Pan-African TV, then we are ceding the air superiority to others. So we're developing our anti-aircraft artillery. We're fighting back against the propaganda through social media. But where's our fighter jet? That's what is meant by this Pan-African TV proposal, for us to take full responsibility and understand that in the propaganda war, that's equipment we need. While we're fighting with our anti-artillery and social media, otherwise we're just ceding that air superiority to the others, and they get the messaging and they win the propaganda war.
Oh, good afternoon and good morning to everyone from California. Hello, dear Excellency, you're just doing it again. She's so amazing, and putting together everybody online the way that we need to be as a people. That's the only way we're going to do it. Everything is social media, everything is TV, everything is radio. So I wanted to just say that I cannot stress the importance of what, I forget who just said it, but someone said that we have to have our own internet. We have to have our own security. Well, that's in the works. That's in the works from Black Hands. And that information has been shared with ADDI. And we actually met at the Congressional Black Caucus in 2019 and discovered that the internet is about to be replaced by radio wave technology. And it's in the works. It's being piloted now. We will have announcements. I'm not sure this quarter, it's almost over. I'm not sure when, but when the time comes. So everything that everybody's addressing today, the security, we don't even, I mean, God got this. It's already done. It's a done deal. So it's just a matter of time. And that's all I can actually say without being, out of my league here. So thank you for the opportunity, and God bless, and stay tuned.
Thank you so much, Gail Marie. We appreciate that. Yes, right now, today, there are all different kinds of media channels. And I'm quite sure that Her Excellency, any legitimate channel that invites her or wants her to come on, she will go on, and we all know that she is going to be our champion and say it straight and say it the way it needs to be said, right, to those audiences. So there are many others of us who are committed Pan-Africanists who can communicate the message. And yes, you're right, we need to package our stories and tell them. But instead of doing that and putting that on somebody else's platform, what we're talking about is we don't need to ask anybody else to host, give us a space to tell our story, because we have our own. This is what we're talking about. When Her Excellency talks about true African economic liberation, by the same token, we're also talking about true African media liberation. So we don't have to try and get an opportunity for the ambassador to speak on Oprah or something like that. We have the opportunity ourselves. We put her on our own shows, on our own media that's being broadcast to as many households as Oprah, if not more. So we're thinking about really, we're not talking about winning a battle here. We're talking about winning a war. You win wars by winning battles. So we can go engage people on various battlefront arenas when it comes to media, media propaganda. We can, talk to whoever is willing to give us space. And we can go there, and if we're, presenting our message or having a debate, we can win. Those are battles won, yes. But we want to win the war. And the war is, we have this outstanding media conglomerate that we control. When I say we, I'm talking about Pan-Africanists. Those who share these values that must be communicated in our propaganda. So, Your Excellency, are you still with us? Ray?
Yes.
Yeah, would you like to step in and speak a little bit about this?
Yes, absolutely. I think that to the brother from Zambia who talked about the young people, it's really refreshing to hear you make comments about the young people and listening to the videos, because that's really where the change needs to start. I have a YouTube channel, but I don't really follow it. I think if somebody can take over managing it, that'd be great, because I personally don't know how to run it. I'm extremely technically challenged, but I think it's a good place to start conversations. If somebody could take charge of doing that, be it a podcast or something, I just can't do it personally. But it's also a good place to start for our children. I do it because I truly believe we have an obligation as elders, and I own our children's ignorance. We all should own our children's ignorance, because we need to do a better job of creating those opportunities for them to really know what's going on with our Africa. I was quite impressed by one of my sisters, an African diaspora in the United States. She called me, she said, in fact, it was Zambia. Her sister in Zambia has a daughter who was 14 years old at the time. That was 2 years ago. And that she saw her phone, and on her profile, she had me on her profile. So the mother said, "How do you know this woman?" And the young lady said, "Mom, you don't know her?" And she said, "This is the woman who's going to change Africa." This is a 14-year-old telling mother that. 14 years old. So the sister called me in the US to say, "Can you believe my sister's daughter, 14 years old?" To me, that was so refreshing, how a 14-year-old could be so cued in. And we need more of that. So she is moving in those circles that are sharing the videos. And we need to encourage more of that. The likes of Professor Lumumba's, we have a lot of the Chimamanda Adichie, we need to pick a list of Pan-Africanists who are talking and passing the message that we want our children to hear. And so I don't know what we need to do, but I think as elders, let's own our children's ignorance and let's make a commitment to do something about it. I think if each and every one of us would do that, we can change our children in very short order. And then of course, the social media on my end, I just need help. I'll leave it to Brother Sipiwe to see what can be done to amplify the message and whatever else we can do to even begin to do something even now in terms of continuing to pass the message on. But that's all I have to say, except that I hope we get more authors, we get more historians to join the group and begin to look at saying, how do we fine tune our message to our children and how best to do it, be it media, TV, radio, or all forms of social media. Thank you so much.
Okay, I hope you guys can hear me. Brother Sifue, thank you.
Yes.
So thank you to Her Excellency and the entire team. My question is directed to Brother Michael and the people who have, for instance, Her Excellency always speak about us being on the table, on top of having a seat at the table or being in the driver's seat. Now, a lot of people have spoken of platforms and where they stream and so forth. But I want, hopefully Brother Michael could go into in terms of ownership. What is the satellite space like? Is it a share ownership? And does we have any, for instance, in the 6th region of continental Africa, if we have any satellites out there in terms of lifespan of a satellite, for instance, those kind of and financial aspects, if you would speak to those, I don't know, thank you.
Okay, now I've done a lot of satellite work, and as of, I can't recall any Black-owned satellite companies because of the cost. It's so cost prohibitive, and then you have to go through all this government regulation and all of that. Most companies like NBC, ABC, and all the rest, they don't really own their own satellites. They just buy transponder space, which is just a frequency, and that's it. So that's how they deliver their content. So to answer your question, no, I can't think of not one Black-owned satellite company.
So not even continental Africa or anywhere else, I just
Well, maybe government, but far as, you know, something that we could piggyback on and have services, I'm just not aware of it. There could be, but I'm not aware of it. And, you know, I've seen most of them out there, but not all.
So then the suggestion might be if there is government owned on the continental, maybe as you said, we can piggyback if we can partner up with those.
Yeah, what you do is you license transponder space.
Okay.
That's the key. You just get a piece of the transponder and that's how you deliver your content.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're welcome.
Excellent question, Sunny. These were some of the things that the Ministry of Information in Zimbabwe discussed with the ambassador, and I was fortunate and honored to be a part of that meeting so I could learn about it and what Brother Michael was just talking about the satellites and, you know, transponder space. And then I think Brother Michael alluded to it as well. There's all kinds of regulatory and there's substantial fees at every part of the process. And now you will understand once again the significance of a diaspora Pan-African capital fund. Because we can't compete and have air superiority, right, without the economic liberation needed to do what it takes to have our own satellites.
At this present time, I'd like to ask our dear Her Excellency, Dr. Arikana Chiambori Kwao, to give a few words of closing. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Sister Ray. Boy, I can't believe it. It's after 11 p.m. over here. We've been on this call for over 5 hours. This simply goes to show you the appetite. We're still looking at 237 people who are still on the call. It goes to show that people are engaged. People are yearning for these conversations. People are realizing that each and every one have a responsibility. Like VP just said, we owe it to our ancestors to bring their spirits back home. They were fetching firewood. They were out fetching water. They were on their way to visit their grandmother when they were snatched and taken away to the faraway lands. Some made it across the Atlantic, many did not. The least we can do over 400 years later is to bring their spirits back home to rest. That's what PAC 8, Part 1 is going to do. Bring that closure. I often say, as a continentally born African, I am embarrassed. I am embarrassed that as Africans, we continental Africans, we have not done something to bring the children of Africa home. I cannot imagine having been born and raised one generation after another, not knowing where I come from. I simply can't imagine that. It was about 15 years ago that I'm talking to a girlfriend, an African-American, and she said a very simple, innocent question. You continental Africans, you never have to worry about the issues we worry about as African-Americans. And I said, what is that? She said, we don't know where we come from. It had never occurred to me that there are people who don't know where they come from. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a wrong that must be righted. I was speaking and addressing a group of African diaspora, descendants of the formerly enslaved in South America, Colombia to be exact. As I was speaking on the podium, slowly I began to see people weeping. People started exchanging tissues. And as I continued to speak, I began to wonder, was it something that I was saying that was upsetting so many people in the room? And so I had to finally just wrap up my presentation. And when I sat down, there was a couple that was viciously getting, you could tell they were having fits crying. The guy got up and the first thing out of his mouth was, "You found us. You found us." And he kept saying, "You found us." But I didn't realize my opening line was, my name is Ambassador Arikana Chiombori. I'm the African Union Ambassador to the United States. I was sent here to bring you home. I did not realize how profound the opening statement had been. I'd never felt such hopelessness, such desperation in a people that was almost palpable. And then to think, who are we as continental Africans that we can just disregard generations of people and pretend they don't exist? It was so painful. I had never experienced such a thing. And it was real. So I set out on a mission to do something about it. And that's why we're here. PAC 8 is going to bring them home. I look forward to seeing all of you in Zimbabwe. As soon as we get the new date, we will definitely let everybody know. Our hope is we'll get the new date. That's gonna be June, which is summer. So we can even get more people to come, and more people who can come with their children. So we can put the spirits of our ancestors to rest. For the conversations pertaining to PAC 8 Part 1 are conversations that are gonna see to it that we do come home, and no one is going to stop us. There are many who are trying to stop us, but for believe they will not succeed, because we are coming home. Africa is home. The wealth of Africa is our birthright, and no one will stop us from accessing it. Thank you all for your time. Conversations are exciting. Today, was an important conversation about our own awakening, about the hunted finally telling their story. We got this, and we are going to do it. We can see clearly now. I believe that was Jimmy Cliff. The rain is gone. The cloud is out of our eyes. We can see clearly now. Let's come home. That we must do. Let's bring the spirits of our ancestors back home and put them to rest. I thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend, whatever is left of it. I appreciate you and I honor all of you. Good night from my end and good day wherever you are. Thank you. Back to you, Sister Ray.
Thank you.